This week will mark the third anniversary of the devastating gas explosion that rocked the town of New Ferry. Inside Out has discovered failings made by Wirral Borough Council in the days, weeks and months that followed the disaster. As Katie Walderman reports, 3 years on, the local community is still suffering the effects of that traumatic night.
The scale of the devastation shows just how powerful the explosion was. The blast was heard up to 6 miles away.
March 25th, 2017, and the town of New Ferry is devastated by a massive blast, the likes of which hasn't been felt on the Wirral since World War II. 81 people are injured, 86 made homeless, and over 100 properties are damaged or destroyed. After a police investigation lasting more than 2 years, the owner of the furniture shop where the explosion took place, Pascal Blasio, is found guilty of blowing up his own premises in a botched insurance job. I was working in the newsroom the morning after the explosion and vividly remember all the calls and emails that came in with updates throughout the day. But 3 years on, and although the site here is partially demolished and the man responsible for the blast is serving 20 years in prison, the feeling here is that little else has changed.
I feel angry at the council for doing absolutely nothing, and I feel angry at the government for not giving us funds to do something around here.
The explosion in New Ferry has devastated us and they have done nothing to help at all.
I don't think the council have done enough, but what I would say is that with the restrictions they've got on their funding, they probably couldn't have done any more without central government help.
But central government did promise to help in the days after the blast.
There will be support, I'm sure, being given to the community into the future, and I'm very happy to ask the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government to meet with her and discuss how that community can be rebuilt and can overcome the impact of this explosion.
Theresa May pledged in government that she would support New Ferry, that she would help us, and it never came.
In January this year, Wirral Borough Council finally published a scrutiny review into its handling of the disaster. The review highlighted a number of failings. The council didn't declare a major incident or apply for aid from the government's Special Disaster Fund. It didn't use its own emergency fund to help victims, and hardship payments weren't paid till over 2 years after the blast. Reading through some of the victim impact statements here in the scrutiny review, it's clear to see that the explosion had a devastating impact on the local community. One person here wrote, "The disaster immediately affected our family income. It had a devastating effect on my wife's mental health. We were underinsured, so we weren't covered for the explosion, had to borrow £50,000 on our house in order to buy the business. And then we had to sell the land to the council to cover the demolition charge." This was the scene in the local pub on the night of the blast. The Cleveland Arms is just a few doors from the explosion site. I called in to meet the woman who's been rebuilding her business after the blast. What have the last 3 years been like?
The last 3 years, it's a struggle because of a fall has fallen. New Ferry was productive. We are individual traders, we are sole traders, we are family-run businesses, and it's destroyed us.
How do you get up and carry on day after day?
Sheer determination, I think. I won't be defeated by somebody that tried to destroy the whole community. So no. Wirral Borough Council could have done more to help the people. They lost their homes, they lost their personal belongings, they lost their business. It just could have been dealt with far better than what it was.
Do you think the people of New Ferry deserve an apology from Wirral Borough Council?
Yes. Wirral Borough Council in their scrutiny review have said many times they could have done better. But yeah, we've still not received an apology for the way we were treated.
Another failing that upset locals was being billed by the council for work involved in securing the site after the blast.
The victims who were suffering with mental health, with debt problems, displaced, were billed. And do you know what? Those letters were debt collecting letters. They made statements like, if you did not pay, we would pass this on to a debt collecting agency.
The council has also received criticism for the lack of financial assistance given to the community. Hardship payments of £1,600 were paid to every person affected. But only in August 2019, almost 2.5 years after the explosion. The council also failed to apply for disaster funding from the government's Bellwyn scheme because they didn't think they'd meet the criteria, but they did. To qualify, a local authority has to spend 0.2% of its annual budget on the recovery phase of a disaster. For Wirral, this would have meant spending £494,000. To date, the council has spent over £570,000, easily passing the target figure. The council did make a separate request for £500,000, but this was refused by central government, who said the disaster was a local issue.
So it's an opportunity to learn, for the council to learn and other agencies to learn.
A group of residents went to meet councillors from all parties to give their reaction to the recommendations in the scrutiny review.
If Wirral Council had applied for the Bellwyn scheme and applied for it in good time, government would have had no option but to help. They would have stepped in and helped.
Can you understand why some of the residents do feel they've been let down by the council? I went to meet the Assistant Director of the council to put some of the criticisms from the scrutiny review directly to him. Do you think, had you declared the incident a major incident, that would have helped your case with the Bellwyn scheme?
Well, on the advice that we had at the time, we didn't meet the thresholds and the eligibility.
What lessons will the council take forward from this?
You know, the lessons that we've learnt from New Ferry, in terms of declaring the incident, we would look at those processes. We're reviewing the all hazards plan in terms of how we can do that. We'd look at how we can directly target money more quickly to the businesses that need it.
Given all those issues you've just listed there, has Wirral Council ever apologised to the residents and traders?
I'm not aware that Wirral Council has apologised to the residents and traders.
Do you think they should?
Well, as I say, in a major incident like this, there are always lessons that you can learn, and hopefully we've demonstrated through the scrutiny committee work that we've done and the other things that we know what those lessons are and we've learnt them, and we will move forward.
Perhaps it's not surprising that residents aren't holding their breath while they wait for change in New Ferry. Some have decided to take matters into their own hands by forming a community land trust, a system where the local people take control of things like affordable housing and local amenities.
When we started this community land trust, we had exactly the same feeling from the community. Oh yes, here's something else that's come along, but it won't be here for very long.
Today, Anne and Mark have travelled over to Liverpool to meet members of a successful community land trust in Anfield, where for the past 9 years they've helped revitalise the local area.
Prove to the community that actually you are here to stay and that you are going to do something for them, but actually what you need is them to come along as well.
New Ferry, they've made a start by setting up a community land trust, because now they have a body, an entity, because they are actually something. They've got a focus really as a community land trust, and I think that's the key.
We have more of an understanding of the processes involved, so I think we're just going to stick with it and just keep going.
I think it's really positive, and I think it is useful. It's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of commitment, but it's promises that we can keep with commitment from the public of New Ferry.